Okay. So, okay. So we just started the recording. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I know it's a lot to take some time out of your schedule for let's see. There we go. So thanks for joining me today. I know it takes a lot out of your schedule to show up and take, 45 minutes to an hour to learn something. But if you registered for this webinar and you feel like you have a problem with gluten, or you're just curious, maybe you know somebody that has an issue with gluten and you want to know more about that, you're in the right place, because I put together a great presentation for you and I think you'll really enjoy it. So first I want to tell you a little bit about my community. I would love to have you come join the Living Fresh community. There's the website, livingfresh.org. It has lots of great information regarding nutrition and recipes and lifestyle. And you can come play on the Facebook page, livingfresh.org. That's a great community. Just lots of posts about different things on health and wellness. Instagram, you can come visit me there. And then of course I have my Complete Detox program, which is another great supportive community on the complete detox versus just focusing on the liver or the body. The Complete Detox focuses on all realms of wellness, including decreasing your toxic load and much, much more. So come play with me on those avenues. I'd love to see you. So welcome to the webinar. You can easily go gluten-free even if you love to eat, and why you should. So before I start, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Nicole Andrews, and first and foremost, I'm Christian, and I thank God for my faith. It gives me the optimistic outlook on life in this troubled world, so I'm grateful for that. I've been married to this fine gentleman for 14 years now, and we have two beautiful children, and I love spending time with my family. It's the absolute most favorite thing that I love to do. And so that's me. I'm also a registered dietitian and functional nutrition therapist. I've been studying nutrition since I've been 21, and so that's 18 years now. So don't figure out the math. So I graduated from FIU, Florida International University, and my postgraduate studies are in the area of functional nutrition, which looks at really about identifying the cause of disease and the cause of conditions versus just managing the symptoms. So I have a lot of certifications, but the two certifications that I thought applied to this particular topic are the, I've been certified in low FODMAP diet for IBS. And if you're not familiar with this diet, it's a group of carbohydrates that really don't break down and cause a lot of issues for patients with irritable bowel syndrome. And I was certified by the two gurus of the low FODMAP diet, Kate Scarletta and Patsy Castos. Another certification, which is most pertinent to this webinar, is I'm a certified gluten practitioner, certified by the doctor himself, Dr. Tom O'Brien, who's really the grandfather when it comes to gluten research and its relationship to disease. And so I love what he says here about people that should be avoiding gluten. He says, like, you can't be a little pregnant, you can't have a little gluten. You just can't. And I see so many people who know that they should avoid gluten, but they don't. And they say, oh, I just had a little bit, or I fell off the wagon, I just had a little piece of bread. And we'll see that during this presentation, even a little gluten can cause big problems. So I want to talk to you about my story as it relates to gluten, because I think that that's important and gives you a little bit of a line of reference. So I believe my issues started in utero, actually. And as a baby, my mom said I even had multiple food intolerances. Um, as a young kid and young adult, I was severely constipated. And, as a kid, you don't really know what normal poop looks like. You just you just go when you go. But now, as in this point in my life, I know what it is to be normal, and I definitely wasn't normal at that time. And so everything progressed. Things started becoming unmanageable when I had just gotten married, about in 2004. I had terrible migraines every day. I had terrible gas and bloating. I had issues with fertility, and my body was just a mess. And I worked at the time, I was working at Holy Cross Hospital in Fort Lauderdale, and I was friendly with a lot of the physicians there, as friendly as you could be with the friendly physicians. And one of the GI doctors, I said, I feel like I might have a problem with gluten. And this is in 2004, he's like, really? Okay, well, come on in. And he gave me a full workup. And he said, we did the intestinal biopsy and it was negative for celiac disease. So eat all the gluten you want. And, it's not that, it's irritable bowel syndrome. So here's the CB on meditation. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you. And so I was really left in a place of despair. And so being the good dietitian that I was, I kept a food symptom diary. And I noticed that every time I ate these kashi crackers, I really loved kashi crackers at the time. It was right when those tasty little crackers came out. They should be called terrible little crackers, but I had them in like my lab pocket. And anytime I ate gluten, I noticed symptoms. And so I knew that it was a problem, and so I started avoiding it. And one of my colleagues at the time said, Nicole, there are some functional tests that you can order. So I ordered myself a stool test, and it came back, lo and behold, it came back super positive for gluten intolerance, fat malabsorption. I wasn't absorbing fat-soluble vitamins in my diet. And it had elevated tissue transglutaminase. And that's something that is a sign of autoimmune disease. So I was already getting signs of autoimmune disease at that young of an age. And so I started on the gluten-free diet, and it wasn't easy, and I wasn't 100%. But over time, I started learning how important it was to be 100%. And granted, it wasn't the only change that I made over the years, but it was definitely the foundation for which my condition became reversed, and I started to feel better as the years progressed and as my gut started to heal. So it also added years to my life, which you'll see in this webinar. So being that I worked with my own issues regarding GI function, I worked with a lot of people, and this is an area I seem to really, do great in because I've had these issues myself. So Gail couldn't leave the house. She was connected to the bathroom within 10 feet. And she really was restricted in her lifestyle. And so after working together for a few months, she was so happy. She was able to participate in her life again. And it was just so exciting for her. And so one more, Pam was in terrible pain. She had just horrible pain. She was on medication. And after working together and following necessary changes, including gluten, she was able to get off her pain medication for her stomach. And, oftentimes medication is great, but it can, for some things, for, when we need it, but oftentimes it's just a cover-up. It's a Band-Aid to the symptom. And if we're covering up symptoms all the time, we're not going to be able to really tune in to what it is that we truly need, because really symptoms are clues that our body is giving us that we're out of balance. And so it's only when we can really tune into those clues instead of masking them and asking them what it needs, then we can truly heal with the right support. So I'm going to be talking about so many different things during this course of this webinar. And I know a lot of you are listening at a later date and time. It is recorded. But I want to make sure that you know there is going to be this special promise for you. And it's something that I created that I wish I had 13 years ago. So we'll talk more about that later. So to really get into it, you know, there's a lot of misconception around gluten these days. You know, out of everybody purchasing gluten-free products, only 14% do it because they know that they have a true allergy or celiac disease, or they feel gluten intolerant. And the other percent, 12%, just feel like it's popular, so they just jump on the bandwagon. 37 heard it was healthier, and then 37% they feel like it's helping them lose weight. And so, you know, you could see there's a lot of confusion out there. Most people really don't know why they should be avoiding gluten, and hopefully this webinar will help explain and clear up that confusion. So you may have heard of these books. These are on the bestseller lists, and they talk a lot about gluten and other grains, and they're great resources, and they do a great job explaining the whys of attaining a gluten-free diet. So in this webinar together, we're going to talk about the truth about gluten, the potential dangers, a simple system to determine whether or not it's a problem for you, and a resource I've created to help you navigate safely and easily through a gluten-free diet. So what is gluten? It's a protein found in wheat, barley, rye, spelt, kamut, and oats. And oats don't necessarily have gluten. They're thought to be contaminated with gluten. And so because the oat fields and the wheat fields, they grow in close proximity. And so a lot of the oats are contaminated. Now, a lot of people say, well, you know, like I eat oats and I seem to be fine. And I say that's fine, but you know, it's most likely short-lived, because eventually, if they're not gluten-free oats, and even just oats in general, they may eventually start to cause problems. But it's hidden in pizza, pasta, wraps, rolls, and other foods and items which we'll talk about. So guess what? Gluten's dangerous. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's actually in plain sight all over medical journals today. And if you just go to PubMed, which is available to the general public, you can type in gluten and associated conditions, and you'll see how many research articles are already connecting gluten with disease and with conditions. And so I just wanted to point out a few of those. The Journal of the American Medical Association found that people with undiagnosed latent celiac disease or gluten intolerance had a significantly higher risk of death, mostly from heart disease and cancer. And we know heart disease and cancer, you may not know, heart disease and cancer are the top killers in America today. And so it's not just from fast food or not eating enough fruits and vegetables and a poor lifestyle. It's also from eating gluten, and especially if you know you're not supposed to. And it sounds drastic, but we'll find out why that is in this webinar. So there's groundbreaking research that proves you don't have to have full-blown celiac disease to have serious health problems and even complications, even death from eating gluten. So 99% of people who have a problem with it, they don't even know it. They really don't, because they associate it with either having celiac disease or just feeling, you know, gastro symptoms. So we'll see that that's not true too. And the dangers of gluten, celiac disease affects 1 in 100 people. Most people don't know they even have it, but milder forms of gluten sensitivity are more common and may affect up to 1/3 of the population. And granted, these are the people that are actually in tune with their body and know already that gluten's a problem for them. So the percentage is actually, the pie is, part of the pie is much, much bigger if you take that into consideration. So as I mentioned, undiagnosed celiac disease is associated with a nearly 4-fold increase in premature death. 39% increased death in those with celiac disease, and 72% increased risk in death in those with gut inflammation related to gluten. So you think, like, I don't understand. Why would it be more in people that don't even have celiac disease, full-blown celiac disease? And the idea is because early diagnosis is key. They were able to get diagnosed, they were able to stop the destruction and heal a lot quicker than people that just don't realize that they have a problem with gluten. They keep eating it and they keep causing destruction to their gut. So you may be sitting there thinking, you know, like, this is crazy. Like, I haven't even heard this before. Why haven't I even heard all of this yet? And the truth is that many conventional doctors, you know, because a lot of people think, like, I'm just going to go to my doctor, and if he doesn't say that it's an issue, I'm, you know, not going to worry about it. But a lot of conventional doctors versus functional medicine doctors, they're not well versed in the area of functional nutrition or functional medicine, which is something that, you know, like I said, it targets health from the cause, not just the symptom. So either they don't care to know the truth about gluten, or they just haven't had the education around it. But clearly you could see there's medical research on it today, and there will continue to be medical research that's published from here forward. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of the research that's coming out, the new research, these are findings that were found up to 5 years ago. It takes about 5 years for things to get published. So we're finding out so much now, and it's just now being published, and it was already kind of like old news. So we need to look at the new research, especially when it comes to this. So gluten sensitivity and celiac disease, one cause many diseases. This is a quote from the New England Journal of Medicine. It listed 55 diseases that can be caused by eating gluten. And this is, like I said, they don't usually say caused by, but unless there's proof, right? So these include osteoporosis, irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, anemia, cancer, fatigue, canker sores, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, and almost all other autoimmune diseases are attributed. And I see a lot of people with different things, especially anemia. Oh, I've had anemia forever. It's always been a problem. Well, why? You know, we don't just have anemia all the time. There's a reason why you have chronic anemia. So gluten sensitivity and celiac, it's also linked to many psychiatric and neurological diseases, including anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, dementia, migraines, epilepsy, and neuropathy, which is nerve damage. It's also been linked to autism. And this is fairly new research. It was a study out of Sweden. They took blood samples from babies and followed them over the years, and they found that the children that developed autism, they traced back to, they analyzed their blood, and they found significantly elevated antibodies to gluten in those babies. And so it's not that, you know, they can't say yet that it caused the autism. There's a lot of factors involved in autism, but it's definitely something that's causing a lot of attention. And so, you know, in my mind, I feel like this is something that needs to be addressed in family planning. You know, if you're, you know, they put a lot of emphasis on including folic acid to prevent spina bifida, but we also need to put an emphasis on identifying gluten intolerance, because this is something that could be life-changing and it could be prevented. And so now we're also finding things with folic acid and the research that's available today in terms of genotype testing is amazing. We're finding now that a lot of people have issues metabolizing that. And so, you know, this is cutting edge research in functional nutrition. So it's really very exciting that we have access to this. Another thing I wanted to mention in terms of psychiatric connection to gluten is that, you know, gluten contains a compound called gluteomorphine. And so it actually produces like a morphine-like effect in your body. So this is why so many people love bread. They're like, oh, I just love bread. It's like my weakness. And there's a reason for that, is because it does produce like a morphine-like effect in our brain, in our body. And it keeps people going back to it, and it keeps them from healing in so many cases. And so research also shows gluten interferes with the amount of blood flow to the brain. So this is why so many people, after they eat a meal with gluten, can have like this fatigue right afterward, you know, or this just, you know, foggy thinking. You know, the blood flow and neurons, they're not working as well. So why has gluten become so harmful? This is the big question, is like, well, you know, we didn't have to worry about this 50, 100 years ago. Why all of a sudden is this such a big deal? And this is why so many people just think it's a fad. And but really, as you could see, celiac disease and gluten intolerance have risen fourfold since the 1950s. I mean, that's significant, partly because of diagnosis, partly because of what's happening with our wheat supply. It goes down to the very, very basic part of just baking bread. You know, that's changed even. The process of baking bread, they used to let bread rise over 18 hours. And that the yeast helped break down the gluten. And now it's left to rise only 2 hours. And so a lot of the bread today has far more indigestible gluten than breads in the past. And the key word there is indigestible. Gluten is actually not able to digest in our stomach, in our body. And so if you think about hydrochloric acid is something that's contained in our stomach. A lot of us have enough of it. There's a lot of people that don't have enough, therefore their digestion is hindered. But if you were to put hydrochloric acid on your finger, it would eat it down to the very bone. If you were to put hydrochloric acid on gluten, nothing would happen. And that's a red flag right there, if you ask me. It doesn't break down. It's actually comes from the Latin word glue, gluten, glue. Another red flag. I don't know about you, but I don't want to eat gluten. And so it interferes with the breakdown and absorption of nutrients, including nutrients from other foods in the same meal. So if you're eating like this delicious wrap on a wheat wrap, and it's got sprouts and vegetables and all kinds of good stuff in it, and then, you know, you have it on a gluten-based wrap, you know, you can kiss a lot of those nutrients goodbye, because you're not going to be absorbing all of them. You might absorb some. And so what happens is that like this gluten, like glue lump sits in your gut, and it can impede proper digestion. It's important to know that not everybody has the same symptoms. Not everybody's constipated. Some people have diarrhea, constipation, nausea, abdominal pain. You know, it goes on, but over time, other symptoms develop, which we'll talk about. Some people have no GI symptoms. Some people have neurological symptoms. Some people have autoimmune symptoms. Some people mask their GI symptoms early on with using Miralax all the time or some other over-the-counter medication, and then they don't even realize they're having GI symptoms anymore. And as you can see, these little like raspberries is part of your gut lining, your villi, and where you see the black arrows, this is the destruction that occurs from gluten molecules. And it just starts to eat away at your intestinal lining, and it causes mass destruction. Another reason gluten is so harmful in today's day and age is because of the use of glyphosate. It's not that gluten is GMO, it's not, it's hybridized and it's sprayed with glyphosate. And this glyphosate, it's an herbicide, and they use it to increase the yield of wheat. And so they get a bigger crop yield. And so what happens though with this herbicide is it's linked to celiac disease, gluten intolerance, and irritable bowel. And in fact, in 2015, not even too long ago, it was determined a probable carcinogen. It's like, why are they still using this? You know, and they do. It continues to be used. So what happens is too with this leaky gut, these large particles and the particles of undigested gluten, and there's a lot of things that cause leaky gut. Gluten's not the only thing, but it's definitely a big piece of the puzzle. So what happens is that there's these tight junctions on the left side of the screen that you can see. It's like sewn together, and that's what a normal gut lining should be. Now, there is a researcher by the name of Dr. Alyssa Fasano, and he works for the Center for Disease, Director of Center for Celiac Research in Massachusetts. He found that gluten contains something called zonulin, and zonulin is a protein that breaks down these tight junctions in your gut lining, and it causes spacing. And so this is huge in terms of research around gluten, is because it's a big part, like I said, of gut permeability. And then what happens over time is that proteins that we're eating come down through these little openings into our bloodstream where they shouldn't really be, and they cause mass destruction in our body, because our body's like, what is this? This shouldn't be in our bloodstream. This should be in tiny little amino acids and vitamins and minerals, not these big proteins. So it starts to attack, and different parts of the body are attacked. So this is why too, it leads to heart disease and cancer, because our body is inflamed. This is one of the main reasons for inflammation. Inflammation is linked to all disease. And so it causes not only inflammation, but it changes the DNA structure over time, so which causes cancer. So this leaky gut and what happens with that cascade can affect so many different areas of our body. And this is a great infographic by Dr. Axe, and you know, it shows that all areas of the body, especially autoimmune conditions in any area, are affected. And it's different. Like what's different for what affects me will not affect you. I might have more food sensitivities and anxiety, and somebody else may have Hashimoto's, or somebody else may have irritable bowel disease, and somebody else may have fibromyalgia or RA. So it's just where your weak links are. It just picks and chooses, and then it will attack that system. Your damage is also affected with nutrient absorption. So if you're not absorbing the nutrients that you're taking in, you know, you're going to be deficient in certain things that lead to other symptoms that you think are just show up, you know, whether it's osteoporosis or chronic fatigue or, you know, any deficiency in these nutrients can cause so many different symptoms. So SpectraCell is a great test. You know, a lot of people are like, well, I'm just going to get my doctor to run some blood work. And I have to mention here too that serum testing is very different than intracellular testing, because intracellular testing looks at your absorption. You could have an exorbitant number of vitamin B12, for example, or vitamin D on your blood work. But when you look at the cellular level, it can be deficient. Why is it? Because there's something going on with the absorption. So this is a test I run. If you're interested, you can contact me and we can get this going for you. And I get it done every year. I mean, I really feel like it's that important to overall health, and just to make sure that you're not deficient or depleted in certain nutrients. So this is a quiz that was made, and it shows a lot of different symptoms related to gluten intolerance. Everything from gut symptoms, you know, just look at this quiz. I'm not going to read each one, but there's so many systems that can be affected by gluten. And I will put a disclaimer out. It's not the end all be all, but it certainly is a cause, and it can certainly contribute. So craving high sugar foods, IBS, reflux, constipation, diarrhea, difficulty gaining weight in children, iron deficiency anemia, head and nervous systems, everything from migraines to poor memory to brain fog to anxiety or depression, restless leg, chronic fatigue, MS, joint symptoms. This is huge. Frequent joint pain, bone pain, osteoporosis, so fibromyalgia. Hormonal systems can be affected by gluten. So you have fatigue, you have inability to lose weight. You know, that's a big one. If, you know, if you're gluten intolerant, maybe you're trying everything, and it can affect that. It can affect fertility. It can affect how bad your periods are and what symptoms you get from your periods, or other hormonal fluctuations, you know, PCOS, endometriosis, even blood sugar management. And it goes on, of course, like I mentioned, the immune system is completely affected with gluten, as we talked about. And so you can see there's just so many different things that are listed. So the question becomes too is, how can you test for celiac or gluten intolerance? You know, you might be sitting there thinking like, gosh, you know, I think I might have a problem. You know, that was a lot of different things, and I have a few of those. So you can ask your physician to run some of these antibodies. I will say, however, that if you've been avoiding gluten for a while, you may get a false negative with this, so caution with that. And then also too, there's genotyping testing, and you can get a false negative here. In fact, 30% of European descent have the gene for celiac disease. And so it's not always 100%. I'll share with you, I think I spent upwards to $500 on a test for this genetic test, and it came back negative. It didn't affect my overall result, as you can see, and so I still have to avoid gluten. So intestinal biopsy, again, some physicians really feel like this is the gold standard still, and it's really not, because if you have any antibodies present and your intestinal biopsy is negative, some physicians will say, well, it's negative. But if you have any antibodies present, it's positive. And another word with the intestinal biopsy, in order for that to be positive for celiac disease, you have to have over 70% damage to your intestine lining before that could be considered positive. So that's another reason why that test might not be the best option, because there's so much damage that already has to be done, and we don't want to wait that long until we're that sick. So a couple more things. Cyrex Labs is is one of the best tests in terms of gluten. This is not cheap. It's well worth it. You have to have a functional medicine physician to order this. And they have great arrays. They could tell you if you're intolerant, not only if you have intestinal permeability and to what degree, but also will tell you what strains of wheat and gluten you have an issue with, and also cross-reactivity. So some of the grains like quinoa and brown rice, even some of the gluten-free grains, can be creating a problem because of the cross-reactivity. So this is the test that identifies that. The one I took years back was Lab. I found that to be very helpful. And the food and symptom log is a great way to identify, because we're our own best judge of how we're feeling, because between antibodies or any positive and any symptoms could be associated with gluten intolerance. So with the elimination diet, this is a great way to tell if you're gluten intolerant. What you want to do is eliminate gluten for anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks and see how you feel. Now, you might start feeling great at 3 days. You might notice you're sleeping better, you're not snapping at your kids, or your joints feel better, but really like the magic number is about 3 weeks, and you want to see how good you feel. You know, you want to get rid of anything that has gluten, wheat, barley, rye, oats, spelt, kamut, triticale. Also, check the full list, because there's hidden sources of gluten you want to make sure that are out too. So then what you do is you eat it again, and then you see what happens, right? You want to see if you feel bad in any case. You want to see if you're foggy headed, you know, not just if you feel bloated, but if you feel like tired after you eat it. If you feel, and these symptoms can last up to 3 days after you eat it. So you really want to keep a close eye on how it makes you feel in any shape or form. And you can refer back to that gluten symptom intolerance checklist too, to jog your memory of different things, and might be good for you to check that out as you're incorporating it back. So this is a big question I get too. Should everyone avoid gluten? And Dr. Tom O'Brien says, you know, why would you eat a food that you notice once you've gotten symptoms for? Well, if you say the symptoms aren't too bad, okay, that's right. Well, they're not too bad perhaps, but they're still killing off brain cells or heart cells or liver cells. And when you get enough of them killed off, the symptoms are much more frequent and they get worse. So should everyone be off gluten? The science says no, but with those with immune response or with symptom response should definitely be off gluten. So this is a small list of what contains gluten. You could see all of the different grains there that contain gluten: rye, barley, bulgur, wheat, germ wheat, gram, farina, kamut, semolina, spelt. But there's also some hidden sources of gluten that a lot of people just kind of breeze over and they don't pay attention to, and they may be eating a lot of these or getting contaminated with gluten and then just still don't feel 100%. So this is again, it's an abbreviated list, but malt starches, vegetable protein, textured vegetable protein, which you see a lot in like vegan products, natural flavoring, soup mixes, salad dressings, sauces, lipstick, vitamins, medicine, stamps, like the stuff you lick, envelopes, and Play-Doh even. So there's another intolerance too that can mimic gluten sensitivity. And like I mentioned, I'm a certified FODMAPs counselor, but these are specifically important for people with IBS, and they're a group of carbohydrates that are poorly absorbed and can mimic gluten intolerance. But If you're off gluten and you still have symptoms, you might want to find out if you have issues with FOD. It could very well mean that, you know, a lot of the foods that you're eating are high FODMAP, and gluten actually is a high FODMAP too. So that's why people can start to feel better right away with avoiding just gluten. So the bottom line is, you know, failing to identify gluten sensitivity and celiac disease, we create needless suffering and death for millions of Americans. I mean, it is that drastic. It is. It really takes years off people's life. We're noticing now, and they don't die of gluten intolerance. You know, it's something else. It's cancer. It's heart disease. It's some other form of disease that develops because of this inflammation in the body. And health problems caused by gluten sensitivity, they can't be treated with medication. You know, so many people say like, oh, Nicole, isn't there like a pill I could take? Like, this is so like hard to do. And I'm like, no, you know, there's just not. There's a supplement that Dr. Tom O'Brien was instrumental in creating, Glutenza, and it's important. I take that every time I go out to eat, because you just don't know, even if you know it's gluten-free, you don't know what kind of kitchen it was made in. You don't know what, if somebody took the spoon from the pasta salad and just put it into the chicken, you know, and for somebody that's really trying to heal their gut, it can be a huge problem. So by taking something like that, that's really beneficial. And, you know, you can always ask me about that later, but that's a good thing, but it can't. It's really just 100% eliminating the gluten from your diet, 100%. That can really help to heal you. And you have to start somewhere, right? So the gluten-free diet, it's the foundational place to start. You know, so many people say like, well, I'm going paleo, I'm going grain-free, and then they'll still incorporate like a bite of gluten every now and then, and that just doesn't work. And the place to start is the gluten-free diet. That is the foundational place to start. Once you're 100%, you start to add on other things, you know, once you feel as good as you can feel with 100% gluten-free diet. And then you could start seeing what else is a problem. Is it grains? Is it other things? And there's so much to healing leaky gut. There's so much. And like I said, gluten's not the only problem with leaky gut, but it's a big, big problem. It's a big part of it. So like I mentioned, I wanted to tell you about this resource that I created for you. I am really excited about this. It took me a long, long time to make this, and it's something that I wish I had 13 years ago to save me a lot of heartache and frustration. I just wish somebody could just tell me, like, what is it that I really need to know about this, so that I can just read that and not have to fumble through all of the websites and the books and find out, you know, and the lists that are overwhelming sometimes. So I created this because it was something that I know that really would have helped me at the time. And, you know, I'll show you, it's like a real life thing. It's a 72-page guide with real information here that I've made up, and it has, I'll show you what it has. I'll show you right now. This is what's in it. Is what I put in this guide for you is what you really need to know, not like everything, but what you need to know along the lines of this webinar, and a comprehensive list of gluten-free foods and additives. That quiz that we went through, that's in there. How to test is in there. What does a gluten-free diet entail? It's in here. Hidden sources of gluten in detail is in here. This is so important. Hidden sources of gluten is what kept me sick for a while, until I really got more diligent about, okay, what is it that has gluten? And if you're not sure, you ask the manufacturer. 5 steps to transition to a gluten-free diet or lifestyle. 25 gluten-free resources and tips, the top 25 that I came up with that I feel would be really useful. a list of reputable gluten-free resources. So this is not just, you know, somebody's blog, it's reputable gluten-free resources. Not to say there aren't a lot of great blogs out there. A dozen great gluten-free recipe sites and holiday recipes, because this is something that's, you don't see a whole lot of gluten-free holiday recipes. I threw a few in there too. Gluten-free alcohol guide, which is important to a lot of people. And 7 tips for surviving family gatherings gluten-free. This is important too, because not a lot of family members understand, you know, what it is with gluten. 50 restaurants in the USA that have gluten-free menus and menu options. That's really cool. Restaurant apps, how you can find gluten-free restaurants in your area. 5 dining out tips. 3 steps to making your kitchen gluten-free. You know, I wanted to make this succinct, easy, things that you can just say, okay, this is what I need to do, not just thumb through information after information, get overwhelmed. Gluten-free pasta and cereal, information on that. Gluten-free flour substitutes, tips for frugal gluten-free shopping. Sometimes it's expensive to go gluten-free, so there's tips in there for that. Tips for the gluten-free traveler, that's really key. How many times do you feel like, you know, that's the big issue, is when you go travel somewhere and then, oh, well, I was traveling, it was hard, I just ate a sandwich. Well, there's some tips in there regarding that. 5 ways to help a child go gluten-free and fit in. You know, it's really hard for kids to be gluten-free. It's becoming a little bit easier, but as I know with my son, we've been back and forth with this, because I do notice that there is a genetic component of this. And thank God I was 100% gluten-free when I was pregnant. Although I notice it in his growth and his behavior. When he comes home from Pizza Fridays, I can't calm him down for the life of me. And, you know, it's really evident that there's a problem there. So these are great resources, and it's going to be, you know, it's still something that, you know, it's something that I do. It's something that I work on too with me and my family. So I wanted to offer that to you too. And so speaking of that, the letter to family and friends, I wish I had this in the beginning, because like I said, not a lot of family and friends understand the impact that gluten can have on your health. And so I put together a little simple yet nice and to the point letter that gives them an idea of, you know, what you need to go gluten-free and why, and how important it is. Because, you know, I remember my pap, who was like my dad, really, you know, he was, you know, my mom's dad, you know, so back in the, he didn't know anything about this, and I tried to tell him, but, you know, I remember he said, oh, but Nicole, there's a tablespoon of flour in this entire casserole. And I'm like, don't, you know, I can't have it. So they just need to be educated. They're not out to hurt you or anything, hopefully. But this is something that's, it's everything you need to know on this topic, and it's just in this one place. So I feel like it's a great guide, and I wanted to offer it for only $17. I had put this, it took me hours and hours and hours to put together, but I think that it's important to offer because at a reasonable price too. I mean, it's a book, so it's similar to other books, but it's a guide, and it's also, you know, it comes electronically, and you can certainly print it out at Staples or Office Depot. But so, oops, I just got a kilometer. So this is something that I hope you'll take advantage of, because being that gluten can affect us on so many different levels, it's important to know where to go with this instead of trying to navigate your way yourself and relying on, you know, the vast resources out there in the World Wide Web. And so I just want to say thank you for coming, taking time out of your day to be with me here today. It means a lot to me, and I hope whether you're listening now or you're listening to this recording later, that you know what you've come to learn about gluten, you've learned about, and it's my true hope really that that you heal your body in the best way that you can, and I would be happy to help in that process in any way that I can. And I just wish everybody a very blessed day. Thanks.